1944. It's a cold grey morning in Auschwitz second camp Birkenau. Hundreds of Hungarian Jews are being herded out of a train at the camp's railway ramp. Inside the barracks, the inmates are going through their daily routine, making beds, sweeping the floors, and scrubbing clothes. The buildings are overcrowded, filthy, and freezing cold. The inmates unfit for labor are being held inside an infirmary. If they don't recover within 2 weeks, they will be sent to the gas chambers. Nearby, in a makeshift lab, stands the senior Schutzstaffel physician at Birkenau, Josef Mengele, quietly examining his latest work. The arriving inmates don't know it yet, but they will soon be handpicked for experiments by the man history calls the Angel of Death. March 16th, 1911. Josef Mengele was born in the southern German state of Bavaria, in a small town called Günzburg. He grew up in an upper-class Catholic family. His father owned a factory that produced farming machinery, equipment that would later support the German military during the war. While his father was a respected businessman, it was his mother who had the stronger presence at home. Josef described her as strict and fearless. Josef had 2 younger brothers, Karl and Alois, and enjoyed an untroubled and uneventful childhood. Despite the nature of his future work, there was no evidence in his upbringing of extreme politics, anti-Semitism, or a capacity for violence. His performance at school was average at best, though he was well behaved and showed a strong interest in learning. At the age of 15, he suffered a series of serious infections, including nephritis and sepsis, which caused him to miss school for an extended period of time. These illnesses also led to a chronic kidney ailment that made him unfit to take over the family business, a role that fell to his younger brother, Alois. This gave Josef freedom in choosing his profession. Mengele graduated from secondary school in 1930 and left his hometown to study medicine at the University of Munich, where he pursued courses in human genetics and anthropology. During his first year, he began to show an interest in politics, joining the Stahlhelm, or Steel Helmets, a paramilitary group that advocated for the restoration of the pre-war monarchy. The Stahlhelm would later align itself with the growing Nazi movement. Mengele became drawn to the idea of racial purity, finding appeal in eugenics, the belief that society could be improved through selective breeding. Mengele transferred between several universities to complete his medical degree. He studied under figures like Dr. Wolfgang Denk and Dr. Franz Hamburger, 2 well-known figures that aligned with the National Socialist Party. Mengele earned a PhD in anthropology in 1935 at the University of Frankfurt, where he studied under Ottmar von Verschuer, a leading racial hygienist who was based at the Institute for Heredity, Biology and Racial Purity. Mengele's role at the institute was to examine people who were suspected of breaking the Nuremberg laws to see if they were Jews. The Nuremberg laws were a set of rules set by the Nazi regime defining German citizenship based on racial ancestry and stripped Jews of their rights, targeting anyone with Jewish heritage. The files Mengele created at this institution became the foundation for identifying people to be sent to concentration camps in the coming years. In 1937, Mengele officially joined the Nazi Party, becoming a party-certified physician. The following year, he became a member of the Schutzstaffel, better known as the SS, which would eventually become the main force running the concentration camps. Around the same time he joined the SS, Mengele got engaged to Irene Schönbein, the daughter of a university professor. At the start of the war in 1939, Mengele was rejected from the first military draft due to his kidney ailment he suffered from as a child, but by June of 1940, he was drafted and became a second lieutenant in the Waffen-SS, working in a non-combat role for the Race and Resettlement Office. In 1941, the demand for manpower on the Eastern Front increased. Mengele was pulled out of office and sent to the Soviet-Russian front. For his service, he was awarded the Iron Cross, second class. The following year, Mengele had transferred to the 5th SS Panzer Division, Viking, serving as a medical officer. During a battle in Rostov-on-Don, he rescued 2 injured German soldiers from a burning tank, earning him the Iron Cross, first class. However, he was seriously injured in the same incident and deemed unfit for combat duty. After recovering at home, Mengele returned to the Race and Resettlement Office, once again working under his mentor, Ottmar von Verschuer. During this period, Mengele was promoted to captain and began conducting practical eugenics research, meaning he now had living human subjects to experiment on. Von Verschuer believed that the concentration camps, which had expanded rapidly in recent years, would offer an ideal setting for human experimentation. He encouraged Mengele to apply for service in one of the camps. Mengele was accepted and assigned to Auschwitz, where he became the chief physician of the Romani family camp at Auschwitz-Birkenau. One of Mengele's primary duties at Birkenau was making selections among new arrivals, deciding who was fit for labor and who would be sent immediately to the gas chambers. On his first day alone, he sent 1,035 Romani people to their deaths. During selections, he was known to dress immaculately in a white SS medical coat, white gloves, and polished black boots. Witnesses said his face remained emotionless as he sent people to their deaths with the flick of his wrist. He was often seen smoking and whistling classical music while sending thousands to their deaths. Over the course of his time at Auschwitz, Mengele was responsible for selecting inmates from 74 different transports. Children under 14, the sick, and the disabled were almost always sent to the gas chambers. It's estimated that 80% of new arrivals were killed upon arrival. He had a particular interest in inmates with genetic abnormalities, often instructing guards to look out for those who were unusually tall, had dwarfism, or any physical impairment. But his greatest obsession was twins, especially children. He believed twins held the key to unlocking genetic manipulation and advancing Aryan eugenics. His fascination, which dated back to his first year of university, drove him to constantly visit the selection ramp in search of twin pairs. During his time at Auschwitz, he selected 1,500 pairs of twins for experimentation. Only about 100 pairs survived. Before experiments began, the children were subjected to a full physical examination. Their height, skull shape, eye color, and even urine were analyzed. They were then bathed, dressed in clean pajamas, and brought to one of Mengele's laboratories. The first stage of the process was a blood test, during which Mengele acted with an unusual kindness. He ensured the children were treated gently, gave them sweets, and worked to gain their trust. But that trust was soon betrayed by horrors that history cannot erase. Once blood examinations were concluded, the children would be sent to his second laboratory, in which his actual experiments took place, every single one being done without the use of anesthesia. From here on, Mengele's horrific experiments started. One of the many genetic manipulation tactics he wished to develop was the ability to change the iris color of children with non-Aryan colored eyes. His method of doing this was to inject dyes like methylene blue into their eyes, which was unsuccessful in every attempt. The result of all his iris color changing tests resulted in the children developing an infection, going through permanent vision loss, or sometimes even death. On numerous occasions, Mengele performed organ removals and blood extractions without the use of anesthesia to see how the bodies of the children would react and deteriorate over time. He also subjected his victims to high-voltage electrocution, often until death, in order to study trauma responses. These experiments were often carried out on twins, allowing him to compare the difference in deterioration between them. His obsession with twins didn't end there. Mengele also attempted to artificially create Siamese twins by surgically conjoining two Romani twins called Guido and Nino. He sewed them together at the spine, connecting their blood vessels and internal organs without anesthesia. The boys screamed in agony for days before dying from infection and organ failure. Driven by his obsession with racial purity, Mengele believed that he would need to develop a method of sterilization that would prevent Jewish women and lesser races from reproducing. So he took Jewish women from the selection ramp and began developing his own method of sterilization. He injected caustic chemicals into their uteruses, often causing painful infections and permanent infertility. It had been reported that at times, Mengele even delivered babies for women who had carried their pregnancies to full term, only to tape their breasts so they couldn't nurse, forcing them to watch their babies die before sending the mothers to the gas chambers. Mengele collected hundreds of eyes, especially from individuals with heterochromia. Some children were killed solely to extract their eyes, which were sent to Berlin for study under Ottmar von Verschuer. Other experiments involved infecting inmates with diseases like malaria, typhus, and tuberculosis to observe immune responses between different races. He also pursued research in phrenology, blood type inheritance, and dissected people alive to examine organs and function. The rumors of Mengele's horrific nature extended past his documented examinations. Survivors later claimed he once ordered a pit to be dug at Birkenau, filled it with fire, and threw 300 children under 5 years old into it. By early 1945, Mengele was at the height of his power, but knew his time was running out as the Soviet Red Army was closing in on areas nearby. On January 17, 1945, he fled Auschwitz, taking his documents and experimental notes with him. 10 days later, Soviet forces arrived at the camp, which the SS had abandoned and set ablaze. Mengele temporarily relocated to the Mauthausen concentration camp in Austria. As the Allies advanced, he ditched his SS uniform and went on the run. On the 2nd of May, 1945, he was arrested in the town of Wieden in Bavaria, an American-controlled area that was common for fleeing Nazis, as they preferred surrendering to American or British soldiers, hoping for a more lenient treatment compared to the Soviets. Mengele was wearing a Wehrmacht uniform, which was the regular German army uniform, successfully concealing his SS identity. After a screening process, he was released. With the war over, the full extent of the horrors at Auschwitz, including Mengele's experiments, began to surface. Survivors gave testimony, documents were recovered, and the sickening details of his work with children and other victims spread across the world. The world was now aware of his crimes, so Mengele knew he had to keep running. He avoided contact with family and worked for 3 years as a farm laborer in Bavaria under the alias Fritz Hollmann. His name topped the most wanted list for Nazi war criminals, and he was being actively hunted by Nazi hunters across Europe. Eventually, he decided to flee Europe entirely. He illegally crossed the Alps into northern Italy and made his way to the port city of Genoa, where pro-Nazi networks and the Catholic Church helped former SS officers obtain false documents. Mengele acquired a Red Cross passport under the name Helmut Gregor. In June 1950, he boarded a ship to Buenos Aires in Argentina, which at the time was a safe haven for fleeing Nazis, under President Juan Perón, who sympathized with Hitler's regime. Mengele lived comfortably in Buenos Aires and worked as a carpenter. He was also a part of the local Nazi community of ex-SS officers, where he was highly respected and protected. His father, who had become wealthy from the war, frequently visited, and the family often reunited at ski resorts. Mengele even felt safe enough among the locals to start using his real name. His wife, Irene, had divorced him due to his prolonged absence. After the divorce, he moved in with Martha, the widow of his younger brother Karl, who had died in 1949, and continued his life in hiding. Mengele moved in with Martha to a high-class suburb in a Jewish neighborhood of Buenos Aires, but his time there was short-lived, as Nazi hunters caught wind of Mengele's whereabouts from the divorce papers Irene filed, which showed that he was living in Buenos Aires. One of these hunters was a man named Hermann Longbein. Longbein demanded the West German government to issue an arrest warrant and have Mengele extradited to face his crimes. On June 7, 1959, West Germany issued an arrest warrant and formally requested Mengele's extradition. Mengele was warned in advance, so he fled first to Paraguay and then to Brazil, where he hid on a remote farm 300 miles from Sao Paulo, living with a Hungarian couple. In 1964, a war crimes trial was held in his absence. The horrors of his experiments were exposed in painful detail, often by surviving victims of Mengele. This resulted in Mengele becoming a hated figure amongst most of West Germany. By the 1970s, government efforts to capture Mengele faded. He remained in Brazil, living with the Starmer family, in a town north of Sao Paulo, under the alias Wolfgang Gerhard. In 1976, he suffered a stroke, but partially recovered. Finally, in February 1979, Josef Mengele died while swimming in Bertioga, Brazil, after suffering a second stroke. He died without ever facing justice or expressing regret for the atrocities he committed. Though he is long gone, the horrors he committed live on, forever etched into history under the name that came to define him, the Angel of Death.